In this lecture, we're going to talk about Snapshot 3D. Now, Snapshot 3D is a modeling tool which is based around the Spotlight interface. Now, there's two other videos on this series that talk about Spotlight. The first talks about Spotlight in the context of being a way to bring photo reference into Zbrush. The other talks about Spotlight as a texturing tool. This will discuss Spotlight as a modeling tool, which utilizes what's called Snapshot 3D, which basically generates geometry and booleans based on alphas. Now notice that I have live boolean turned on right now. If you saw the video on hard surface, you'll remember making this wasteland warrior character. And here I've got a series of cylinders which are set as a subtraction object. So when live booleans turned on, they are subtracting from the mesh here. Now Snapshot 3D uses booleans heavily. So the first thing we need to do is go to our subtool list and append a polymesh star in. I'm going to select that star and open up the scale gizmo and just scale that down, and let's rotate it 90 degrees. And the reason I'm doing this is because Snapshot will pick up the mesh thickness of whatever is selected. So what I want to do is I want to get this spotlight, and this star, and I want to put it inside the head, and then I'll pick up the thickness from that, and that's just my first mesh that I'm working from. Simple as that. Let's turn off visibility on the other two groups so we're only seeing the star right now. Now to use Spotlight and Snapshot 3D, go to Lightbox and open up the Spotlight folder in the Lightbox, and here we have a series of spotlights. If I just double click the first one, it brings up this spotlight here. If I press the Z key, I can click and drag to move all the alphas together. These are just a series of alphas that have been loaded into the spotlight. And these are going to be using these sets of tools down here primarily. These are for generating geometry with Snapshot 3D. So how do we do this? Let's begin with the circle. I never use the original alpha. I always click the duplicate button right here to duplicate it and then grab and drag my copy over. The reason for that is I can always then go back to my originals. If I click on the orange circle, I can move my spotlight interface. Notice that it wants to snap to the image points on the center, the midpoint, and the corners. If I snap to the image center, I can scale this up with the scale button there. If I click and drag this alpha over a piece of geometry, it smart snaps to the underlying geometry. So I'm going to snap it to the mesh center of the star and just scale it up to about there. Now, if I want to turn spotlight on and off, the interface, press the Z key. If I want to turn the whole spotlight on and off, press Z key, or Shift Z. Shift Z turns the whole spotlight on and off. Z turns the interface on and off. So now I'll bring the interface back up, and I want to click this button here, Snapshot 3D. Now if you watch up here at the top of the screen, there is a tooltip. Click creates a new subtool, shift click appends to the current subtool, click Alt will subtract. So we're just going to click to add a new subtool. So watch the subtool menu here, click Snapshot 3D, Shift Z turns off the interface. It has now added a new subtool. And you see it's picked up the thickness from that polymesh star. So now I can get that polymesh star and I can actually delete it. I no longer need that. Click OK, and there's our first cylinder. Press the Z key to bring the spotlight back up. And now I'm going to scale this alpha down a little bit, and I'm going to click this button here, Frame. This is really cool. If I click and drag Frame, it will actually frame the mesh out. Let me move the interface. You can see what it just did. It just basically made a circle out of that, and the further I drag that, the thicker I can make that circle, as you can see. Now instead of adding this time, I want to subtract, so I will hold down the Alt key and I will click Snapshot 3D and then Shift Z to turn off Spotlight. And you see what it's done? It's created a new subtool, but it's turned on Boolean subtract. Now there's also a video just on Booleans. If you have not watched that yet, you might want to watch it after this because we go into Booleans in more depth. I want to keep this organized, so I'm going to select the top subtool and create a new folder, and I'm going to call it Ear Housing. This is some kind of a radio receiver that's going to go on this character's mask. And just click and drag to bring that subtraction object up in there. We'll select that subtract object and turn on the move gizmo. Now if I go to frame mode, you can see the mesh is there. It's picked up the thickness from the original mesh. If I were to move it along the Z-axis, turn off frame mode, you can see I can actually make that a debossed shape rather than a shape that's punching all the way through. So that's a little more interesting. We'll keep that like that, then press the Z key to bring our interface back up for Spotlight. Let's move that alpha off to the side, and let's grab something else this time. Let's grab this one here and duplicate it. Let's bring it over here, snap to the image center, scale it up, and then snap to the mesh center. And let's scale that up to about there. Now I will Alt-click to make a subtraction object. Shift-Z turns off my spotlight. I need to drag this up inside of the interface here. And if I'm not seeing it, sometimes I have to move the model to make it pop back into Boolean mode or turn live Boolean on and off. So there we go. That's quite a nice effect we get there. Now, here's something cool that we can do. If I were to duplicate this mesh, drag it up inside there, go to my gizmo here and shift click and drag, make that subtraction as well, and then pull that one back in space, I can create something like this. If I go into frame mode, you can see what's happening is I'm basically just using that subtraction tool to further trim out that previous subtraction. Alternately, I can set this to additive, and I can dial this back like this, and then just add another layer of detail to that. So let's go ahead and press the Z key to bring our spotlight back up, and let's take a look at another spotlight now. Let's go to the light box, spotlight, and let's just grab another one. Say, for example, this one here. If I double click it, it loads that new spotlight up. I can scale it down so I see everyone on screen at one time. And let's grab this mesh grid here, duplicate it, drag it off, snap to the image center, scale it up, and I'm going to rotate it, but hold the shift key so I can snap it to increments. And then this will snap to the mesh center there. And we can dial this down. And I'm just going to make that an additive shape, just like so. Now, if I go to my gizmo, I can pull this forward. I can scale this to make it thinner. I could put it behind that other shape. I can bring it forward so it's this sort of panel sitting underneath these two tabs. It just adds an extra layer of mechanical complexity that makes it a more interesting shape to look at and sort of gives it a bit of veracity. In model making, they're called greebles. They're just little mechanical details that give a sense of scale, complexity, and use to an object. So let's go ahead now and add another. I'm going to move this off to the side, and I want to grab something like this. I'm going to scale this up and move this off to the side. Now, we can edit alphas using these same tools. What I will do is I will duplicate this alpha like this. I will snap to the image center for the duplicate alpha. I will rotate and press shift, so I rotate it 180 degrees, and then I'll snap it to the object center. Okay, so we get something like this. Now I can use the extend here to shrink one down or lengthen it, like so. So I could lengthen that. Let's grab that alpha underneath there, and let's use the extender on that. I'm going to snap to the image center, and I'll use the extender to extend that out. So I can extend the alphas like this. If I move my interface here, if I hold down the Control key, I can move from the center of my my interface. If I move down here, I hold down the Control key, I can, oops, wrong way. There we go, hold down the Alt key, I can scale from that point. All right, so let's grab our other alpha here. Make sure that that's the one we want. Nope, I want this one that's behind it, so I'll grab that one. And I'm going to snap to the mesh center. And I'm going to snap to here. Click on the y-axis and hold the shift key to force it to go up this way. I am going to scale it down, and then I'm going to press Alt on the Union button. The Snapshot button makes geometry. This button allows me to manipulate alphas. If I Alt-click on that, it has just subtracted that shape from both alphas that were overlapping it. So let's move that one out of the way. So let's do this again. Let's snap this to the center of the image, snap this here, Alt-click the Union button there, and we can continue to manipulate this alpha. Let's go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees like this. And maybe we want to shrink that down with the extender like this. If I click these buttons here, I can move the alpha, if I hold down, hold down the Shift key, I will move everyone at the same time. Let's go to here. There we go. Grab that, come back here. Make sure I get that alpha. There we go. Let's snap to the image center again and make sure I'm getting the right alpha. This alpha is currently sitting in front of the other one, so I'm going to send this to the back so I can grab this alpha now. So let's move this off there. Now, there we go. Now I'm going to click the green axis here and just snap, shift this over here, and then click additive. Now I will rotate this 180 degrees, or I mean to say 90 degrees. No, 180 degrees. It's one of those mornings. Start rotating, hold the Shift key, and there we go. Sometimes that can be a little bit frustrating. There we go. Now I click that green axis, hold the Shift key down. Perfect. That's what I'm looking for. I want to make sure that these line up and mirror. There we go. Now I will add by clicking that. Move this over here, grab this one, and add. There we go. So now I have manipulated this alpha by subtracting and adding to it. I'm going to snap to the center. That snaps to the mesh center here. And let's rotate this. Let's put it at kind of a funky angle like that, and snapshot. Press Shift Z to turn off our interface, and then we can move this out like so. Maybe we'll bring it to about here. Okay. Press the Z key, and we will snap this. Make sure I've got that selected. Turn off perspective. There we go. That snaps that to the mesh center. Now, if I go back to my expand here and I click Alt and then click on it, it will contract that alpha. See, it's contracted that now. So if I Alt click on Add, press Shift Z, I've created a subtraction object there. So if we go to frame mode, we'll be able to see it. So if we bring this back, we should have. Let's bring all these back up in here. Turn visibility back on that. There we go. So you can't really quite see it because it's, there we go. You can see that that's carving away that aspect there. Let's delete that. Click OK. Let's go back to this guy here. Let's make that additive. Go into frame mode, and you notice that it's polygrouped here. Watch this. If I go to my polygroup, or go to my geometry menu, go to crease, there we are, and hold down the control key. Let's zoom in here. Hold down the control key, and then click and drag on bevel width. I can real-time bevel this shape. There we go. Turn off frame mode, and that just makes that a little bit more interesting. Let's transpose and countersink that into the center of the model like that. Now I will duplicate this. I'll go to my subtools. Let's duplicate that. Hold down the Shift key and then just rotate that like so. So we get two of them. Move that back up in here, and then I will merge down. Click OK. Now I kind of want to create a little slot where it feels like these pieces could maybe slide around like they're dials or something. So to do that, I am going to create a new piece. Let's go ahead and move this off to the side here. And let's go back to our original spotlight where we had our circle. We'll select this and duplicate it. I'm going to snap to the image center here and make sure that my original poly mesh is selected. Let's scale this up, and then we will snap that to the image center. Scale that up. And then, of course, we've got our frame button here. Now, again, if I Alt click drag frame, it will contract it like that. So it does something along those lines. If we undo that and go back to our frame mode here, clicking it will just frame. Shift click will expand it like that, as you can see there. So I am going to undo that, and I am just going to do my regular frame like this. And I'm going to make that a subtraction object by alt-clicking. Turn off Spotlight. Turn on frame mode so I can see this object, and I'm going to scale it in the Z-axis and then scooch it like this. Turn off frame mode, and now you can see that creates a recessed kind of groove there where those pieces could articulate. Now, let's go ahead and turn on the costume and turn on the head. I have the ear housing selected. I will go to transpose set. So I'm transposing just everything inside that folder, and I will scooch this out this way. Let's scale it down so it fits about here over, I think this is a good area to fit it into actually. Let's shift, click, and drag to do a little rotation here. And I quite like the idea of these little bits sticking forward. Let's rotate it around that axis by a couple degrees. Maybe one more this way. There we go. Countersink that. And perfect. Let's exit out of our transpose mode, and here we have our bit of ear housing, some kind of transmitter or something. Maybe we want to add a little antenna to it. That might be a cool thing to add as a last little detail. So let's go ahead and let's grab this piece here because we want it to be rather thin. I will go to solo mode, zoom in here, press the Z key, and let's go back to our other spotlight because I believe we had a nice little piece here that could be used for an antenna. Scale this down. I think perhaps this one here is good. We'll duplicate that, move it over, snap to the image center, scale it up, and let's extend it. Extend. There we go. And shift, no, not shift, just click Snapshot 3D. That will add a new piece there. There we go. Let's move that outside of that group. Turn off solo. There we go. This will be our antenna. So I'll do my transpose. Make sure we turn off our pizza box stack. That's the transpose group. I'm going to turn off or unlock the gizmo and send it to the unmasked mesh center and then lock it again. And then what we'll do is we will just raise this up a little bit. Let's solo that. I'm going to hold down the Alt key so I can move my pivot down here at the bottom. And then I will extend it up this way and maybe rotate it back a little bit like so. There we go. Now we're getting a nice little antenna coming out of this ear housing. Now if I want, I could move that inside of that group again. And here we have our ear housing folder. Now, if I turn off Live Boolean, I'll see all of my original shapes. In closing, I just want to show you how you can turn this Boolean into actual geometry. And we talk about this again in the Boolean video, but I think it's a nice thing to cover here. If I want to make this into an actual geometry, single piece of geometry with all of these Booleans baked into the mesh as actual geometry, hit the gear here and click Boolean folder. And what that will do is it will Boolean those shapes. Leave the folder intact, but turn off visibility on it and then append a new subtool that has all those parts. So there we go. If I go into frame mode, you can see, let's go here. There we go. You can see that if I zoom in, there we go. You can see that is actual geometry. Those pieces are unified and all those Booleans are now actual shapes. If I turn off Live Boolean, they remain, whereas these Booleans on the front go back to their original shape. I can change the material on there. Let's just add a little bit of like green metallic to that. That might be neat. Let's go to Material, Color, Fill Object, change back to our basic material 2, and there we go. That is Snapshot 3D. It's an incredibly powerful way of generating complex shapes very, very quickly and very, very easily just by using alphas. And you can create your own alphas and load them up into those folders, into those spotlights, I mean to say. You can just append them in, or you can just edit them right there in the spotlight using the union tools that I showed you for editing the spotlight alphas. So I hope you found this video helpful. The Snapshot 3D is probably my favorite of the hard surface modeling tools. It's taken the best of Booleans and the best of creating geometry based on alphas and put them together into a tool that I think is really responsive and easy to use. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next lesson.